451 AD, the Catalaunian Plains in what is now northeastern France. On one side stands a Roman general who spent his youth as a hostage among barbarians. On the other rides a king Christian chroniclers will one day call the Scourge of God. Behind him marches a coalition of tribes, all bent to the will of a single nomadic horde that rode out of the depths of Asia. Rome, the empire that had ruled the known world for 5 centuries, is now forced to beg its former enemies, the Goths, for an alliance, just to survive. How did a people whose very origins remain debated by historians manage to bring the greatest civilization of antiquity to its knees? This is the story of the Huns. The origin of the Huns remains one of the most debated questions in ancient history. Many scholars have proposed a connection between the Huns and the Xiongnu, a powerful nomadic confederation recorded in Chinese chronicles as a persistent threat on China's northern frontier for centuries. However, a direct, unbroken link between the Xiongnu and the Huns has never been conclusively proven. And this is a point where historians genuinely disagree. Some argue the Huns were direct descendants of these Central Asian nomads who migrated westward over generations. Others believe Hun became an umbrella term applied by Roman and Gothic observers to a shifting coalition of steppe peoples who may have shared only partial ancestry. What we do know with more confidence is this. In the second half of the 4th century, the Huns appear in the historical record, moving into the steppes north of the Black Sea. Like the Saka and Scythians before them, they were mounted nomads whose entire way of life revolved around the horse, the herd, and constant movement. They built no cities in the traditional sense. Their power rested in the horde itself, in mobility, and in the composite bow. Their arrival acted as a detonator for the whole of Europe. The Huns struck the Gothic peoples living north of the Danube with devastating force. Some Goths submitted, others fled in terror toward the Roman frontier, begging Emperor Valens to let them cross into imperial territory as refugees. This mass displacement, Goths running from the Huns, then rebelling against Roman mistreatment, set off the chain of events that led to the catastrophic Roman defeat at the Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD, an event many historians treat as the beginning of the empire's long unraveling in the West. For the first few decades, the Huns operated less like a unified empire and more like scattered warrior bands, sometimes fighting as Roman mercenaries, sometimes raiding Roman territory. That changed in the 430s, when a new leader named Attila rose to power. Ruling first alongside his brother Bleda, and then alone after Bleda's death, Attila welded the fractious Hunnic tribes into a genuine military state. Much of what we know about Attila comes from Roman and Byzantine sources, particularly the historian Priscus, who personally traveled to Attila's court as part of a Byzantine diplomatic mission. Priscus left a rare first-hand account describing a feast at Attila's residence and noting the king's surprisingly plain habits compared to the extravagance of those around him. This remains one of the few surviving windows into the Hunnic world that isn't purely hostile propaganda. To understand why Rome struggled so badly against the Huns, you have to understand how they made war. The core of Hunnic power was the composite bow, a weapon built from layered horn, wood, and sinew, capable of outranging most infantry bows of the period. Hunnic warriors trained from childhood to fire this weapon accurately from horseback, at a full gallop, in any direction, including backward, the famous Parthian shot. This gave them a devastating advantage in mobility and ranged firepower that heavier, foot-based Roman legions simply could not match in open terrain. Hunnic armies avoided pitched battles when possible. Their preferred tactic was the feigned retreat. A wave of horsemen would charge, loose arrows, then wheel away as if fleeing. Enemy formations that broke ranks to pursue would be lured into unfavorable terrain, surrounded and destroyed by a second wave of riders. This tactic, common across steppe warfare from the Scythians to the later Mongols, repeatedly punished armies that fought according to the more rigid, close formation traditions of Rome and its neighbors. Hunnic forces were also famous for their sheer speed of movement. Roman and Gothic sources describe Hunnic armies appearing seemingly out of nowhere, striking a settlement, and vanishing before a proper defense could be organized. This meant traditional Roman strategy, fortified frontiers, garrisoned cities, slow legionary marches, was often the wrong tool entirely against an enemy that simply refused to fight on Rome's terms. Crucially, by Attila's reign, the Huns were no longer a purely mounted archer force. Attila's empire absorbed Germanic peoples such as the Gepids and Ostrogoths, who fought as heavy infantry and provided additional tactical flexibility. This combined force, Hunnic cavalry supported by subject infantry, is what marched into Gaul in 451. Under Attila, the Huns became a genuine imperial power. They extorted enormous tribute payments from the Eastern Roman Empire, launched devastating campaigns across the Balkans, and at times threatened the outskirts of Constantinople itself. Byzantine emperors repeatedly paid vast sums in gold simply to redirect the threat elsewhere. The turning point came in 451 when Attila marched west into Gaul. Historians disagree on his precise motivation. Some see a straightforward bid to seize territory from a visibly weakening Western Roman Empire. Others point to a curious diplomatic episode. Honoria, sister of the Western Emperor, allegedly sent Attila a ring and an appeal for help escaping an unwanted marriage. A request Attila apparently interpreted, or chose to interpret, as a marriage proposal giving him a claim to half the Western Empire. Ancient sources preserve this story, but modern historians remain cautious about how much weight it actually carried in Attila's decision to invade. Facing Attila was the Roman general Flavius Aetius, a man who, as a young hostage among the Huns decades earlier, had learned their language, their customs, and their way of war firsthand. Aetius understood something painful, but necessary. Rome alone no longer had the strength to stop Attila, so he did the unthinkable. He allied with the Visigothic King Theodoric I, a former enemy of Rome, now an essential partner in survival. The resulting Battle of the Catalaunian Plains, fought in 451, stands as one of the largest engagements of late antiquity. Ancient sources offer wildly inflated troop figures, and modern historians treat these numbers with heavy skepticism. But the scale and brutality of the fighting are not in doubt. The battle centered on a critical piece of high ground that both sides raced to seize. Roman and Visigothic forces managed to secure it first, forcing Attila's coalition into a costly uphill assault. The fighting was ferocious and confused, with ancient accounts describing a small stream running red and swollen with the dead. King Theodoric was killed in the chaos of combat, reportedly thrown from his horse and trampled by his own advancing troops. His son Thorismund rallied the Visigoths and pressed the attack.
For freedom and glory! Break their lines!
By nightfall, Attila had withdrawn behind a defensive ring of wagons, prepared for a last stand. But Aetius, wary of destroying the Huns completely, some historians suggest he feared this would leave his Gothic allies too powerful, removing Rome's own leverage in the region, did not press the final assault. Attila was allowed to retreat, battered, but intact. This is a crucial point historians emphasize. Catalaunian Plains was not the crushing, decisive defeat of Attila that popular memory sometimes imagines. It was a costly stalemate that halted his advance and cost him the initiative. But the Hunnic army itself survived largely intact. The following year, in 452, Attila invaded Italy directly, sacking cities across the north, including Aquileia, which was reportedly destroyed so thoroughly that later tradition credited its refugees with founding Venice in the surrounding lagoons. Rome itself lay dangerously exposed. According to a tradition preserved in later sources, Pope Leo I personally met with Attila, and the Hunnic king subsequently withdrew from Italy. Historians debate what actually drove this retreat. Some credit papal diplomacy directly. Others point to more practical factors. A famine and disease outbreak ravaging Attila's own army, combined with the threat of an Eastern Roman force advancing from the rear. Most modern historians conclude it was likely a combination of these pressures, not a single miraculous intervention that convinced Attila to turn back. In 453, Attila died suddenly, according to ancient sources, on the night of his own wedding, apparently from a severe nosebleed while intoxicated, though some modern scholars have speculated about other causes. His death triggered immediate collapse. An empire built entirely around one man's personal authority could not survive his absence. His sons fought over the succession, instead of governing together. And in 454, at the Battle of Nidau, the subject peoples of the Hunnic Empire, led by the Gepids, rose up and shattered Hunnic power for good. Within a generation, the once terrifying Hunnic Empire had effectively ceased to exist. The Huns left behind no cities, no written chronicles, no lasting monuments, but their arrival altered the trajectory of European history, accelerated the fall of Rome, and redrew the map of an entire continent. Attila ruled for barely 20 years, yet the shockwaves of his campaigns still echo 15 centuries later. Perhaps the deepest lesson of the Hunnic story is this: great empires don't always fall to a single killing blow. Sometimes all it takes is a people riding out of the steppe, setting off a chain of events that nothing can stop.